Hi, welcome to Punchline Talks, the business breakfast briefers. My name is Mark Owen, and each week I invite a panel of business experts to review the morning newspapers, tell us about what's happened in their own individual business and their own individual business sectors, and finally, what's caught their eye in this week's Punchline. I'd just like to thank our fantastic sponsors, Hayswood's Accountants and Business Advisors, which we couldn't do the show without them. Okay, right, let's introduce the panel. We have Patrick Chambers. He's the chairman of Gloucester City Football Club. He took over the 1st of June, and they've just introduced the new Gloucester Monster Burger, and you've got to see it to believe it. We got Ollie Christie, the CEO and founder of Neon Play, a mobile game studio making mighty fine games for Apple's App Store to Google's Play, with over 170 million downloads. They're based in Cirencester with 25 staff and a turnover between 7 and 8 million. We've got George Tatham-Losh. He's the owner and director of Move Sales, with offices in Gloucester, Cheltenham and Worcester. I forgot how many staff you got, George, but we'll come to that when we talk to you a bit in a minute. And finally, and never last but not least, we've got Joshua Taee, CEO of Huffkins Bakery and Cake and Tea Rooms, concessions in John Lewis. They've got exports to Japan, 130 to 140 staff, turnover around 6.5 million. And it's great to see you all. Thanks ever so much for joining us. Okay, let's see if we can share my screen, find out what's going on in the national newspapers. And this is before the by-election results. So it says tax breaks for office checkups to stop staff being signed off. But it really is about NatWest boss says sorry over Farage row. The Daily Mail, apologies of sorts from Coots, silence from the BBC. The Daily Telegraph, bank boss says sorry to Farage over accounts. The Guardian, taxpayers to fund 40% pay rise for royals despite cost of living crisis. The Daily Mirror, Andrews Epstein lies on Newsnight. The Financial Times, Ventafall halts offshore wind projects to reset for renewable energy plans. Bad news for wind power. The Eye, 1 in 6 people will be stuck on NHS waiting lists. The Daily Express, fury over plan to axe pension break. The Metro, just stop foiled. The Sun, Josie on the jungle. And the Daily Star, are they quackers, says the Daily Star, as council wants to ban flying kites, feeding ducks and tree climbing. All things I like to do in my summer holiday. What am I going to do? Okay, let's start with you, Josh. What have you picked out from today's headlines, please?
Sure. I picked out a piece in Punchline, Mark, that I thought was just indicative, really, of the times we're living through in the business landscape. It's an exclusive restaurant's plea to our local MP in Cheltenham, Alex Chalk, and it's an open letter written by Gareth Fulford, who is the owner of the Purslane restaurant, and he does a very good job, I think, of outlining the stack of challenges facing his business. But it's a very good proxy for the sector. We're all very familiar with the pandemic, far too familiar with it, I think, in many ways. But the legacy of what's playing out now in hospitality is pretty vicious. The government support that was offered to the sector, whilst it was talked up fairly heavily by politicians as support at the time, it was in fact, for the majority, it was business loans, which were underwritten, mostly underwritten around 80% by the government, which enabled the banks to lend. But those loans are now, being repaid. The interest rates are rising, as we all know, and against that backdrop, you've got a business that is struggling to recruit staff because of the tight labour market. It's seeing falling demand as the cost of living rises and people roll off fixed-term mortgages into a new interest rate environment, and they start to moderate the frequency of dining out, and they start to moderate their spending when they do. along with other, discretionary spends. This will not just affect hospitality. It's retail. It's a lot of other sectors that are feeling this. But it's a fairly perfect storm. So I thought it was a very insightful piece, and the way that it's written from the view of one man running one business pulls you into the story, makes it a little bit more real, I think, than just hearing big sector statistics. These are real people who have invested hundreds of thousands of pounds of hard-earned cash, their own cash, and they are really struggling to survive.
And the sad thing about this story is that it affects so many other people as well, because it's not just Gareth who runs his company, but it's his wife. His whole being of what we do, isn't it? If we create something, we make something, and then it's so many variables, isn't it, against him in a way.
Yeah, and he talks very well to that. He also talks to the supply chain and the businesses behind his egg supplier, his veg supplier, all of those other businesses which are then codependent on him. And he highlights quite well as well the difference in the tax regime and the difference in the way that specifically hospitality is treated in the UK as opposed to the way it's treated in Italy and other European countries, where actually a lot of the tax burden is lower and there's been a lot more genuine support, not just underwriting of loans that the business then has to carry, but actual grant style, genuine sort of financial support that's been offered in other European countries that perhaps value that sector. It's our third biggest employer as a sector in the UK. It's a huge part of the economy, but it's feeling fairly beaten up at the minute and pretty undervalued, and it hasn't really got any breathing room. But he does a very good job of outlining that in a very human, real, and I think very effective way. It's quite a touching.
And I've written to Alex Chalk myself to see what response he's going to give, but I can't see the government doing very much. Thanks ever so much for that, Josh. I'm going to go over to you, Ollie. What have you picked out from the national press today?
So I got from the national press or from Punchline?
Of national press to start with.
National press. Okay, cool. Well, I picked out two rather differing stories, and they're sport and music. So one was, I don't know if you watched the Ashes yesterday, but Zach Crawley getting the most stupendous 189 runs. And I just thought it was quite interesting just to refer it to back to the world of business, that what the England cricket team have done with Bazball in the last year, from having been the most pathetic test team of defence and been, I think they won 1 in 16 test matches or something. Ben Stokes and Brendan McCullum have just come around and totally changed the psychology, often using the same players. But I just think in the world of business, it's just really interesting to see how businesses can pivot, a bit like the England cricket team have done. I'm in mobile games in the early 2010s. The industry pivoted from paid games. We were charging 59p, $1 for our games, and most of the industry was. And then it went to freemium, which at the time we really struggled with. How can you give away free downloads and make a business out of it? But it's been proven that you make more money from free than from paid. And it's just very interesting and I think in the pandemic, actually, is that a lot of businesses had to pivot. The restaurant businesses might have done home delivery service or sending packages of food with menus, et cetera, et cetera. But I love it when a business pivots and does something different.
No, thanks ever so much for that, Ollie. It's a bit like the football club now, isn't it? Selling Monster Burgers and became making national headlines for Monster Burger, Patrick.
Yeah, well, like the first item, that was discussed about hospitality, a football club is in leisure and entertainment and hospitality ultimately, and there's a massive choice of where you can spend your money, and we know people are under a lot of pressure financially. So I think gone are the days where a football club can think, well, yeah, lots of people will come watch the game because we're good at playing football. You've got to get it right off the pitch. And I don't know how many of you have ever been to sort of non-league football, but the food on offer, shall we say, usually leaves quite a lot to be desired, because the ethos is buy as cheap as we can, sell it as much as we can. The credit really goes to my wife, really, for the Gloucester Monster. We ran another football club for 4 years before we took over at Gloucester, and we became a destination. Ground hoppers, football fans love to chat, and Burger Chat is just one of them. So we've gone out there and sourced a 6-ounce gourmet burger that's 90% steak, and the Gloucester Monster has 2 of those in a brioche bun with all the salads, the gherkin's choice, or whatever you want, a proper melted cheese sauce at just £6.50 as well. So it's good value, but that's probably enough Burger Chat.
What have you picked out for the papers?
From the paper, and it's probably topical for me because my youngest son is now moving due to his girlfriend's work. She's a doctor and she's about to specialise in anaesthesia in London. So they've got to move into London. And of course, they're renters. So, of course, one of the articles, I think it's in the Independent, well, most of the papers have featured it about we're facing, the highest rents in history. The average rent in London now is £2,567. And that is pretty much exactly what they're going to have to spend, for a small flat, with a little garden. And I suppose the strangest thing is I'm involved in property in my day job. I develop and sell residential park homes. We're seeing property prices drop at a fairly rapid rate, really, over the last 6 months. And yet, of course, because interest rates are rising, landlords who have leveraged their portfolio, and that's how they've grown their portfolio, and they were encouraged to do it, weren't they, for many, many years by the banks, by politicians, grow your portfolio. Now they're under massive pressure because obviously their tax deals have changed, in recent years. So they're having to push rents up whilst their property portfolio value is, of course, dropping. So what the answer is, be interested to see what the rest of the panel think. But I think it's a smoking time bomb. And I think it's going to have massive problems for society.
That's fantastic, Patrick, because it
Can I
builds
jump in on
really
this?
nice. Yeah, I was going to say, George, it's a fantastic sequence to get you in there. Obviously, George.
Well, interestingly, I picked the same article, Patrick. So we obviously have a similar taste here.
Yeah. Well, mine's because of my son, and yours is obviously because of your industry.
Exactly that. It's a topic of conversation regularly in the industry, across different companies, but also internally. I think we have to try and remember to look at local information rather than national. And I always struggle when I see national stats on mortgages, on rent demand, on sales. And I always think, well, how does it affect the areas that I work in? And I think if you break down Cheltenham and Gloucester and Worcester, well, Cheltenham actually, because there's not been a huge influx of what I call corporate tenants, Cheltenham's remained relatively level. I mean, rents have been increasing, and we've been issuing rent increases for our landlords because they've got to be able to, break even at least. But the Gloucester market has gone through the roof. I mean, rents in Gloucester, but like properties compared to Cheltenham and Worcester, the rents in Gloucester are higher than they are in Cheltenham now. For, let's say, a 2-bedroom, 1, 2, or 3-bedroom flat or house, we are achieving a higher rent in Gloucester. But interestingly, and we were talking about this only a couple of days ago, I would say probably 80% of the tenants we're letting to are not local. The NHS and businesses based in Gloucester Business Park, for example, that is the vast majority of our tenants. So actually what's happening is they're competing against each other, which is driving the prices through the roof, which is maybe making it unaffordable for people who actually live here their whole lives to be able to rent. It's absolutely crazy. I mean, we've recently launched a block in Gloucester Docks called Britannia Warehouse. That was 37 modern new build apartments. We had all 37 let in a space of about 3.5, maybe 4 weeks. And there's some of the highest rents we've achieved in Gloucester for 1- and 2-bedroom apartments. Last week, we launched another block, which previously was commercial space, and we've just achieved £1,050 for a small 1-bedroom apartment, a 1-bedroom flat in Gloucester with no parking. So rents are very high. How long is it sustainable for? Well, it was like this 12 months ago. They just keep going up and up. And at some stage, they're going to have to saturate and slow down, but it doesn't seem to be anytime soon.
And it's quite funny because Gloucester is, it really is becoming an investment hub. Yeah, and I
Really
think
is.
that new 107 million forum, I don't know if any of you guys watched it, but I was there the other day. We did a little bit of shindig there. 107 million pound. It is coming out the ground so fast, and it is looking. It is going to change. It's going to change the way that people view the city. It really is. I don't you, George, as you see it on a regular basis.
Oh, I mean, Gloucester is going great guns. I mean, the money that's going in there, the sales values, the rents, and interestingly, it's not now just investors buying or converting the flats. They are selling to first-time buyers. So you've got the young professional market moving in, and I think that's been a backlash of rents in places like Bristol being so high. So it's cheap to live in Gloucester with decent access and decent transport links than it is to live in Bristol. You know, that's why places like Quedgeley and Kingsway have gone through the roof as well, because it's kind of commuter belt stuff now.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And there's so much stuff. Of course, they're building a house all over. Thanks ever so much for that insight, George. We're going to go over to you now, Josh, and talk about your own individual business sector. Obviously, you've opened a new store, you said, in the Cotswolds. So, how many stores have you got now, and where are they all, and where's the new one?
Yeah, we're up to 9 locations in terms of cafes. So 3 of those are in John Lewis department stores, Cheltenham, Kingston upon Thames, and Oxford Street, down in central London. And then we have standalone high street units in Burford, which is where the firm was founded, Stow-on-the-Wold. You're testing my memory now. Stratford upon Avon. Whitney, which is also where we have our craft bakery in a separate light industrial unit, and the most recent opening was in Moreton-in-Marsh, little market town, which you may have heard of on the London Paddington line out towards Worcester. So that's the high street side, and then we from the bakery in Whitney we have a wholesale sort of business to business piece, an e-commerce business there, and we do export work as well, with as you said, our biggest market being Japan, of all places. So that's the current shape and size of it.
How the hell do you manage all that? I mean, that many people, 130, 40 staff across you've obviously got a good team behind you as well.
Yeah, we're very lucky. I've got the former managing director of Leon Restaurants, Frankie and Benny's, Miller and Carter Steakhouses. I've got a really fantastic team. We've got a long-standing team as well. So we've grown, in the last 7 years, we've gone from three stores up to 9, and then the e-com, the wholesale, and the export and licensing is all built in on top in that time. So a lot of the team have been with us a long time, and we've been through iterations of growth, which means that they've learned on the job, really. But it's a fun business. Yeah.
Your costs must be going up through the roof as well. I mean, obviously the energy for the bakery, staff costs, rents. How do you, have you had to manage, put up your prices to reflect that? Are people still coming through the door? Are they still spending a lot of money, Josh?
Yes, it's a mixed view. I mean, we have some very good news coming through the business. We're seeing a return of foreign tourism now, which is helping us hugely in our tourism exposed locations. We see that anecdotally, but we also see a big uptick in things like tours and group bookings. We have various spaces upstairs where we can take 30 or 40, even 50 people, and do a sort of seated service for pre-booked groups. So I think that's a big positive. We also have in some locations, because the Cotswolds is a bit of a retirement mecca, we actually have a slightly older demographic that supports us, particularly out of season, actually, when our tourists are not so many in number. And a lot of that generation are actually fairly well insulated financially. I think around 2/3 of properties in the UK have a mortgage on them. A third of them don't, and my understanding of that sector is that a lot of those wholly owned properties sit with generally slightly older individuals who've had time to pay them off, and a lot of them also on triple locked pensions as well, perhaps with savings, seeing quite a good rate of return now in addition. So maybe not as pressured as some of the younger parts of the population too. Business to business is growing very fast. We supply into independent cafes, so we're really looking to support businesses much like our own by providing really good quality bakery-led product that they can then onward sell, and that's growing very fast. But yes, we are under pressure in terms of heat and light. Our bills are well over budget. We're managing it everywhere we can. Utilization, pricing, contract length. It's fairly nightmarish, that part. It's a very fiddly bit of your business to manage as well. It's quite, impenetrable. The language and the way the whole industry is structured is awkward. Labour market remains pretty tight. So filling roles if you need to fill roles or you need to grow, which is our problem at the minute. We're growing in the bakery and we're finding it quite hard to bring new people in. We're good at retaining the people we have, but bringing new people in is tough still.
Yeah.
And consumer sentiment, it is slightly dampened. We're in a slightly more insulated part of the market. We're maybe a £12 receipt on average. We're not a steakhouse where you're spending 30, 40 quid a head. So we're more of an affordable luxury, I suppose. And we're very lucky in that we have our own bakery, so we can control, our production. We can change recipes, we can flip to different recipes, so we can be quite agile when, for instance, the prices move on various products. We can be fairly responsive, but for a lot of businesses, that's a lot harder if you're not vertically integrated with your own sort of in-house production in the way that we are. So it's a real mixed bag at the minute. We're very much trying to be optimistic about it, and there is growth out there. But conditions are tough.
But it's tough, and that leads us very much nicely on to Ollie. Thanks ever so much for that, Josh, insight as well, and great for you to. I know how busy you are, so it's great to have you on the show again. Ollie, it is tough. Let's be honest, business is tough there. How are you guys faring?
Yeah, I think the mobile games industry is tricky at the moment. We have to spend a lot of money marketing our games because the real way that people discover games is through advertising on other games. And Apple have changed their privacy settings in the last year or so, which has really screwed Facebook, which is essentially the place where we advertise a lot of our games. So that's made it more expensive to acquire games. One thing though is quite interesting, I thought would be worth just discussing, is AI. And I don't know if any of the panel are using AI in their businesses, but we're starting to use it more and more. First of all, ChatGPT for designing games, for ideas for games, for naming, for marketing copy. And then Midjourney, which is a visual tool whereby you can literally describe anything and you can get photographic quality. I mean, phenomenal quality stuff. You wouldn't even know was it a photograph or not. But it's great for inspiring ideas for characters, for backgrounds, just for visual looks, color palettes. It's totally extraordinary. I don't know, Mark, if you're using AI in your business for writing copy, but it's just stunning and extraordinary what it's doing. And I had a great phrase of the day that AI is not going to take our jobs. It will do, but AI will take people who can use AI will take your job. And I think that's really important. And what we're trying to do within the company is give every single employee either ChatGPT or Midjourney, depending on their role. It's going to cost us £2,000 a year for the whole team. So it's tiny, and it will save us so much time, make us better. And I think it's going to transform the world as much as the Industrial Revolution does. And I think it's going to be a bit of a sledgehammer when it truly hits everybody.
It's funny you mention AI. No, we don't use it, by the way, at the moment. All our copy is majority bespoke. We're all written by our guys and stuff. But I did do a sort of test of it. I was asked to do a review of the Everyman Theatre. And a friend of mine who runs his own business, he was telling me all about ChatGPT, and we were doing a Zoom call like this. And he brought it up and he wrote this piece for my review for the Everyman Theatre within around 30 seconds. And it was actually quite frightening. And then I just inputted, my own personal view on it. And because that needs that personal touch. It's quite frightening, actually. And you are right. I think you hit the nail on the head. People who use it would be okay if they understand that they use it, and they'll take the jobs of other people that don't, I suppose.
Well, out of interest, Josh, I asked I asked Google Bard, because Google Bard is more up to date than ChatGPT, where your next 2 stores should be in the Cotswolds, and it's just a chipping Camden and Bourton. So there you go.
Well, there you go. Maybe it's got a crystal ball.
So Ollie, your games at the moment, do you want to explain which games you've got very quickly?
Yeah, I mean, we're working on a ton of new games. We're always testing new games, and we're a mixture of creativity and science. So we have to come up with great ideas and have talented artists who make it look beautiful, programmers who make it happen, and designers who do the economy. So we're always testing, and we'll let the data show us what the marketing potential cost is going to be through spending $50 a day in America. And then we'll get some data after 4 or 5 days. And then once that's got a potentially good marketing or a low marketing cost, we'll then go through various stages of making more and more of the game and seeing how players engage with it. But on top of that, we're looking more and more at our back catalogue of games, which are already established hits, and seeing what we can extract from that to improve the game, put in new features, put in more monetization. So it's a real mixture of the two. So it's fun, we're making games, so it could be worse.
And you're looking happy. You're looking really happy. I think last time we talked just after the pandemic, and it's great to see you. I did pop in to see you, by the way, when I was delivering the magazines.
Oh, well, let us know next time when you're there, because another challenge is we're quite a remote studio these days, which I'm not such a fan of, but yeah, the world has changed.
Yeah, you're not getting your guys back in the office yet.
Some are, but not as many as we'd like.
No, I know that feeling. I get that all the time from everybody. Thanks ever so much for that insight, Ollie. Patrick, let's go over to you. Obviously, you've taken over Gloucester Football Club.
Yep. Well, obviously, I'm not a Gloucester boy like some of you. I'm actually Nottingham born and bred, although I now live over in West Berkshire. So I'm getting more and more interested in all things Gloucester. So the story that obviously struck me from Punchline this week is how the council have managed to miss out on this sort of £220,000 spending because basically they just ran out of time and missed the deadlines of the Section 106 money that had been made available. And £220,000, I know what I could do with that just at the football club, and I'm sure everybody would love that opportunity to spend money that might enhance a facility, have help for the public. So it does smack of a little bit of ineptness somewhere. Somebody's made a big mistake, or a group of people. But in my experience, before we came online, I was just telling you a simple story. When I took over the football club, setting up a new bank account with the same bank that the football club had been with previously, and the same bank that I use. And it was computer says no. And I went, well, what do you mean? Well, the address doesn't exist. It's not on Royal Mail. You need to speak to the council, street naming and house numbering, which I finally managed to speak to the 2 people that were in that department. They looked in their gazetteer, I think they call it. No, there isn't a football club in Gloucester. So you probably know, the locals will know, obviously it flooded back in 2007, and that iconic picture, the water up to the crossbar. So they became nomads, but they got planning permission, built the new ground moved into it in 2020. So they've been there 3 years, but the building is still classified as being demolished. So
very, very quickly then, Patrick, what's the hardest thing have you found taking over the club as chairman? I know you had a bit of a time behind the scenes, but what's been the biggest of it all?
Well, those people that do follow football in the county will know that Gloucester City on the pitch last season, they did make the playoffs in the National League North for the first time. Unfortunately, they did fall at the first hurdle, but it was common knowledge that the club was losing around £30,000 a month. So they'd gone down this sort of hybrid route of sort of semi-professional footballers being paid to train during the day, which precludes you from some of the top quality part-time players. So you've got to find a model where you're going to be competitive, but you can't carry on losing £30,000 a month. And the owners and chairman that were funding that gap decided they weren't going to do it anymore. Struck a deal with me back in January. So I've known for a long time I was going to take over, but Yeah, the challenge is, we've got new management. We're basically starting with a complete new team. There's only one player that's been retained from last season. So yeah, lots of challenges, but fortunately, because I had the experience of running a smaller club for 4 years that had issues, a lot of them financial, as lots of football clubs do. In the news now at the moment, Southend are on the brink, of going out of business. You've seen it happen with Bury, Macclesfield, lots of clubs, sadly. So yeah, I've got to find a model where we can become sustainable, viable, be competitive on the pitch. And that's why one of the reasons we're really focusing on that match day experience. It's actually the only thing a chairman can control is what happens off the pitch. Once they cross that white line, even the managers has got limited, influence. Yes, he can make the right substitutions. Hopefully he's put the right 11 out, the right tactics. But once they cross that white line, anything can happen. But off the pitch, you can control. So we're focusing on, we've done the bar up, we've brought in some new beers, everything's looking well. We've got people going through quicker. Our spend per head compared to last season, just in the 3 friendlies we had, has gone up by sort of 70-80%.
Wow.
You've got to get people to spend the money when they're in and enjoy themselves.
Wow. So up 70 or 80%.
Yeah,
that's quite amazing. Is that because of the quality of the food, or have we changed the beer?
It's a combination of everything. More staff, serve people quicker, sensible queuing system, just 2 tills at the end of the bar, 2 people boring. When you see a long queue at a sporting event, we've all seen it, haven't we? And you think, oh, I won't bother. And we need them to buy that pint for £4.50 or that burger for £4.50. So it's got to be a good pint, it's got to be quickly served, it's got to be a good burger, it's got to be quickly served. So we're focusing very much on that match day experience. We brought in Tim Flowers, a legendary goalkeeper, won the Premiership, played for England. He's our new manager. We're recruiting local players that have got experience at the level. So the spine of the team has now got 6 or 7 Gloucester boys in it. Last season, the last few seasons, they haven't had any local players. So there's going to be a better connect with the fans. So yeah, we've had decent numbers through the door, considering they've only been friendlies so far. Once the season starts proper, the first home games on the 12th of August. So we're hoping to see lots of old faces and maybe some new.
Well, Patrick, I'll tell you what, why don't we get together for a coffee and have a chat how Punchline can connect with you guys a bit better?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. So
come across to the club and I'll show you around.
Yeah, I've been there for their opening game, actually, when the stadium relaunched and everything else. I was in the director's box there watching it, and they actually won that first game as well. It was a great game. I think they won 4-1. Anyway, thanks ever so much for that insight, Patrick. We're going to go over to you, George, but unfortunately we don't have very much time. We kind of talked about the marketplace anyway with you, but very quickly about your own individual business, because you stepped away from being the MD. Why did you do that?
So we've obviously grown considerably, and I was spending more and more time managing my brilliant team, and I was stuck behind my desk, and I missed dealing with customers, I missed dealing with investors, and I missed bringing the business on. The drug that fuels me, if you like, is doing deals and helping people maximize the return out of their properties, and going around properties and advising people what we can do differently. And I wasn't doing as much of that as I wanted to do. So we brought in our new MD, a chap called John Brewer, who brings with him a lot of experience. Previously he was used to go in and kind of fix broken branches for a larger business. So he brings a lot of skill sets with him to manage the team and get the best out of them. And he's best placed for doing that. Whereas I want to get back to what excites me, which is helping people move and helping people maximize the return on their investment. So that's why we did it. So I'm still heavily involved on the day-to-day. I'm sat here in a suit right now, about to go to the office. But it takes one aspect of the business away from me, allowing me to focus on the other.
And I just want to say congratulations to you, George, because you grew that business very quickly, and you seem to come into the marketplace as a disruptor. And before you know it, there you are with 3 stores.
Thank you very much.
fair play to you, because obviously my office was down the road from you as well. Although I used to look in like that, but you never waved. Anyway. Right, we're kind of running out of time, guys. So we're just going to wrap up with any stories from Punchline. I think we covered a couple. I can't remember, George, did you pick out a story from this week's Punch?
Well, both the stories I picked have already been covered, so I'll just remain quiet.
Which ones were they? Which ones were they?
The Punchline, I was going to talk about the council story as well, with the loss of the funding, and with regards to national, I was going to talk about the independent and the rental prices as well.
Okay, thanks ever so much for that. Ollie, what have you picked out from this week's Punch?
Just two very quick stories. One was the very sad news about all the DJs, presenters leaving BBC Radio Gloucester because of the BBC cutbacks. And I just cannot believe that within the whole BBC spending that they can't look after all these local radios, which is such a key fundamental sort of communication lifeline for a lot of people. But also at Versarium, where they've had to find a new CEO. There's this guy called Stephen Hodge, who's been there since 2017. And I like the fact that he's gone through the ranks. Obviously, incredibly clever guy, looks very, very young, but he's obviously very talented. But I like the fact that they promoted from within when often people look externally, understandably. But I think that's just a nice little story.
It's a bit like using your photograph as well, Ollie, that we've got in the system. That's what it is, mate. He's not as young as that as he looks in that photograph. I'll have a word with somebody. No, thanks ever so much for that. Josh, is there any other story you picked out for this week's Punch?
I think I just pulled the trigger on mine straight out of the traps and spread the doom and gloom of the hospitality sector, which I can only apologise.
No worries at all. And Patrick, was there anything else that you picked out from Punch this week?
No, that was it. Was just the council, the same, you know. So and linked to my own experience so far. Well, no, the stories I picked out were making the headlines for me this week. Actually, was Dale Vince's launch of his new EcoJet. Fair play to him. The man is a marketing genius, if you ask me. The other one was McMurtry building a new EV factory showroom in Wootton under Edge, and it being under threat by the council, who might not want it, and they might move the whole lot to Wales. And then the final thing, the story that really caught my eye also, was that this Gloucester losing out on possibly £220,000 of Section 106s that they could have got the money from if they'd had their systems right. Anyway, that's all we've got time for, unfortunately, this week. I'd like to thank my fantastic panel for joining us, the brilliant Hazelwood's business accountants and advisors, and also for everybody who's watching. If you like the show, please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you again next week. And don't forget, it's all in the Punchline. Bye. That's if I can switch it off.